And we are live. Welcome back to today's national weather forecast. We've got some big stories to talk about today. We've got a possible major ice and snowstorm that you can see is going to be developing over the southeast, moving through the Ohio Valley, and then dropping a large amount of snow over West Virginia and Virginia. So we're going to really look at that one because you can see that's going to be a big storm right there. In the west, while we were supposed to have a big ridge protecting us, keeping us nice and warm, no precipitation, that isn't going to be happening, which is good if you like rain and snow and you're a fan of winter weather. But personally, I was kind of looking forward to the nice warm sunshine. But as you can see, not going to happen. We have a number of systems moving through California over the next week. It seems like there's 3 systems in total, which is a big change from that protective ridge we were supposed to have. Now, also in the forecast that we have to go into, well, you can also see we're going to be going into that precip in the northwest up there as well as that major storm there. So that's precip-wise. The other big part of the story, and possibly the even bigger part of the story, is what's going on with the temperatures. We have an Arctic blast of cold air. We've been talking about it for the last week, and now you can see it is officially here. Montana 30 to 40 to even 50 degrees below average. And that's pushing all the way into Nebraska and the Midwest. And unfortunately, it's not going anywhere. You're probably feeling pretty cold right now if you're living in the Midwest, but that cold is just going to continue and spread out, and in some cases actually get even colder. So we've got lots to talk about today. That was one of the longest intros I've ever done. As always, if you're watching this video after the live stream, you'll be able to go down in the comments below where I put the timestamps for the different weather stories we'll be talking about, so you could just click that and go straight to the region you're interested in. I should also mention, if you're watching this after the live stream, that this might not be my most recent forecast. I do these every single day, so you can check to see if I've done a more recent one, because it's always important to stay updated with the most current information, especially with weather, because the models change awfully fast. So let's go back to that precipitation, take a nice national overview of what's going on across the country. You can see there was one little snowstorm that moved through the Midwest and Northeast earlier this morning. I'm not going to spend too much time on that because the system is basically off the coast and gone. What I want to spend time on is this major system, or possibly major system. I have a good feeling that it's going to drop some major snow in some locations because it's got the cold air. It's going to be bringing in moisture from the Gulf of Mexico. And overall, it looks like, as of right now, the forecast models are showing there will be major impacts. Possibly the largest impacts from the storm will be on this strip of ice you see here. It's that red color right there, stretching all the way from Texas up all the way through Kentucky. And then you'll see we'll even get into Virginia at some points. We're going to really dive into that because that might be the biggest part of this storm. We do have areas possibly picking up over a foot of snow with that one, but the ice may in fact be the top story when it comes to that storm. You can also see, though, heavy rainfall with that. Some locations picking up 2 to 3 inches of rain. And then in the west, I talked about this earlier, no longer protected by that ridge. Looks like we have some heavy rainfall along the coast. We're going to take a nice local look at Northern California in a second here. And then also large amounts of snow, and I shouldn't say large amounts of snow in the Sierras. We're going to get maybe a foot in the next week. And then in the upper northwest, the models have changed. They look a little reduced from what we were seeing yesterday, but still have locations picking up over a foot of snow. So we'll look at that as well. And then whatever happens in the west ends up happening in the east. So those systems are going to move across the country, and we'll be following those throughout the next week, as it looks like we have exciting weather just to talk about for as long as we can go into the forecast. I always just like to take a broad look of where the precipitation is going to fall. Ignore the more northern states here. We'll look at the snowfall map in a second. This is more to see how much precip in the form of rain we're going to be picking up. As you can see, large amounts of rain falling throughout the southeast, working into Texas, areas picking up 2 to 3 inches of rain with that major storm that we're going to be diving into. You can see also throughout the Pacific Northwest along the coast and in California, getting some decent rain as well, so we'll look at that as well. When it comes to the snow though, I know it's winter time, people love to see the snowfall forecast. That's what fell this morning and is currently falling right now. I'm not going to spend too much time on that because not as much a forecast as what's saying, as much as just telling you what's going on right now, which you probably know because you could just look out your window. So we're not going to spend much time on that. What I want to spend time on is the next system coming in that you can see has the potential to drop over a foot of snow throughout West Virginia and Virginia, and even working into Pennsylvania a little bit, could be getting 6 inches there. And then in the west, you see in the Cascades, over a foot of snow over the next week, and the Sierras should be picking up a foot of snow as well. So let's look at the pattern that's driving this, because that's sometimes the easiest way to see a storm as it comes in. It's actually right there. It doesn't look like all that much, but you'll see as it comes through here, this is when it starts to pull in some moisture from the Gulf of Mexico and pull down that cold air, and that is what's causing that storm right there. And then you can also see that multiple patterns that are going to be moving through California and the rest of the West right there, just over and over again. Certainly not the ridge we were supposed to have. It looks like we have 3 or 4 systems coming at us. But also on this map, the one thing you might have noticed is that giant blob of cold air right there. And that is the other massive part of this story, the Arctic blast of cold air, where some locations are 30 to 50 degrees below average. When you mix in wind chill, places actually feel like they're 30 to 50 degrees below zero. So we're going to look at those locations, but it helps to first take a look at what's driving this system. Why is this cold air here in the first place? And it really has to do with what's going on with this low pressure system up here in Canada and this high pressure system here in the plains. Now, this map perfectly illustrates what's going on. I hope you can actually see the little wind streams right here, but around the low, you have counterclockwise wind. So you think on the bottom part of here, you can see that it's pulling those winds from west east. Well, the exact opposite happens with this high pressure system here. High pressure system has clockwise rotation. So on the northern edge right there, it's also pulling the winds west to east. So it's really the combination of these two systems creating this perfect little funnel where they're both pulling in that air from the cold Arctic right over Montana, through some of the northern states like the Dakotas and Minnesota, and into the Midwest. So that is really what's driving this blast of cold Arctic air. It's these two systems working together with their winds in the exact same direction, pulling this cold air in. And you can see it's coldest in Montana because that's where those little isobars that you can see there are the closest. So that's where your winds are going to be the strongest, and that's where you're going to be pulling in the coldest air. So a good way to look at that is the temperature anomaly map. That's basically just a fancy way of saying how far off of the averages are you. And you can see Montana, which is already one of the coldest places in the lower 48, that is 30 to 50 degrees below average. So one of the places that's already one of the coldest in the US is 40 degrees below what they're typically getting. And you can see that cold air working all the way down into Texas and the Midwest as well. And something interesting happens here that I actually noticed in the middle of my live stream yesterday. It looks for a little while on Wednesday that the cold air is going to pull back or just ease up for a second. But you can't get too comfortable. It looks like it eases up. It looks like we're no longer 40 degrees below average throughout the Midwest and the plains. We're just 20 to 25, which would still be a story in itself right there. So it looks like we ease up on Wednesday, and then we actually get another little blast of that cold air that comes down on Friday and then into this weekend. You can see an actually bigger blob of cold Arctic air works its way in, going all the way down into Texas where you're 40 degrees below average, and through the Midwest as well. And I think the main reason for that second blast of cold air is as our low, that major storm we're going to be talking about, as it moves across the country, that's winds flow into a low pressure system. That's going to be pulling some of that cold air as it moves across the country. So that, you can't get too comfortable when you get that little easing up of the cold temperatures on Wednesday and Thursday, because you can see there's another blast coming this weekend, and it looks like it might even be colder than the one we're experiencing right now. 40 to 50 degrees below average through the Midwest. And then, like I always say, weather moves west to east. That's going to then spread up into the northern or the northeast, and then even just kind of dissipate throughout the entire eastern half of the country here, working all the way down into Texas, all the way into the 16th. So if I have to sum that up, it's maybe make your Valentine's plans inside, because as we look at Valentine's Day, a large portion of the middle of the country is 40 degrees below their average temperature. So let's actually look at what some of these temperatures are right now. Like I said, this has already begun. When looking at this map, you can look at the little numbers that show you the temperature, but I think an easier way to look at it is where it's blue, that's where you're below freezing. So below 32 degrees. Where it's purple, that's where you're below zero. So that's where you're in the negatives. And this isn't dealing with averages anymore. This is just straight up Fahrenheit temperature, where you can see where some of those colder locations are. In Montana, like Great Falls, we're 28 degrees below zero. Through North Dakota, Minnesota, same story, below zero temperatures, even minus 15 and minus 20 at some time. So even though it seems like you might be easing up a little bit in the Midwest, you're still below freezing, and in some locations, still below zero. So let's go through and see if we can see that second blast come in over the weekend. Looks like it's right about Saturday. We got the first little feeling of that, and then as we work into Sunday, it's officially here. You can see it's accompanied by that high pressure system, and that is just pushing that cold air right into the Midwest. Minus 15 in St. Paul, minus 15 in Omaha. Montana this entire time seems like it's minus 20 or more. And that is just the temperatures. So what you have to keep in mind is you're mixing these freezing cold temperatures with wind. So when you mix freezing cold temperatures with wind, it feels like it's even colder. There's places throughout Montana, North Dakota, Minnesota that are going to feel like they're 40 or 50 below zero. So we actually have some warnings in place in those locations. See, we have a wind chill warning and wind chill advisories throughout Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, stretching all the way into Illinois. And unfortunately, that's really just the start of this. It looks, like I said, that second blast of cold air might even be more significant as we get into this next weekend. So we're going to have to keep our eye on that as well. You can see where we also have other warnings up in the northeast there. That was what happened this morning. That's basically, that system's already basically gone. This is the start of that new major storm that we're going to be talking about later. You can see they have the winter weather advisory through Texas, working through Oklahoma, and then just a watch as we get into the Ohio Valley, because it's still a ways off in the forecast for that location. But we're certainly going to be diving into that, because that looks to be one of the big weather stories going on throughout this week. If we want to see what kind of impacts are expected as of right now, you can see one up in North Dakota. I believe these impacts are due to that wind chill warning, that where it feels like it's 40 or 50 degrees below zero. You can see they have it as moderate impacts, but when it feels like it's 40 or 50 or below, that's where you can actually start having threatening safety. I think part of the reason they don't have that as major or extreme impacts is because a freeze warning doesn't exactly have as big of a catastrophic impact on property, and I know that's one of the things that they plug into this model to decide how big the impacts are going to be. If you think about like a major winter storm where you have 3 feet of snow, that can damage property. Freezing, that certainly impacts the roadway conditions, but not so much destructive to property. I'm just kind of talking off my head there because that's why I think that's not considered major extreme, although the temperatures certainly do appear extreme. Where we do also have some moderate impacts is where we're going to have that ice warning going all the way through Oklahoma and into the Ohio Valley, working all the way into West Virginia. That, I believe, will turn into some major impacts over the next few days. They're not accounting for that major snowfall we're going to get into West Virginia or Virginia yet, so we're going to have to stay updated with this map especially as we work through the next week, because it's certainly not showing up there, and that's where we could be getting over a foot of snow. And then if we look in the far west, it doesn't seem like much is happening, but that's because the real exciting weather is a little ways off in the forecast. And that is, in fact, where we're going to start because, like I always say, weather moves from west to east. So what's going to happen to the east eventually, we got to start in the west to see where it begins. So just taking a wide view of the west here. Like I said, not much going on right now. And that's why those warnings aren't showing up on that map before, but we do have a number of systems coming in. The first one looks like it's going to start to come in Thursday afternoon into Thursday night, shows up as some heavy rain along the coast of California, snow up into Washington, Idaho, and Montana. That's going to spread out over the entire region, drop some decent snowfall to the Sierras, and then move out. But right behind it is another system here. That's going to bring more widespread snow to basically the entire Northwest. Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Nevada, Sierras, all getting snow with that second system that should be pushing in Saturday night into Sunday. And you can see widespread rain for California as well with that one. And then it does look like there's an even bigger system right behind that that's going to be hitting Washington and Oregon, but that's all the way getting into next week. And I typically don't trust a forecast more than a few days out, so we'll stay tuned on that big one coming later. But first, I want to take the wide view because, like I said, this is often the best way to see what's actually happening. Now, I mentioned this is, it's hard to show. Just imagine that's not there right there. This is what the forecast was supposed to look like for California for the next 2 weeks. It was supposed to have a consistent ridge right over us. It was supposed to look like this last weekend where San Francisco felt like it was 70 degrees. It was completely sunny. It was actually nicer than it typically feels in summer. And I was thinking that's how it was going to be for the next 2 weeks. But unfortunately, we've got this, or it depends on your outlook. I'm a fan of nice warm weather, so it's unfortunate for me. If you like rain and snow, if you're a skier or snowboarder, or you're concerned, I probably should be more concerned about the drought, but it's certainly good to be getting rain and snow. So there's a silver lining to everything. That system is going to be bringing some rain and snow to California, which will help with the drought. So that is fortunate. And then we got another system right behind it. So certainly not that big ridge setup we were supposed to have. And there's that big one towards the start of next week that we're going to have to look at as it gets closer to the forecast and the models get a little more accurate. So let's take a look at California. There was some very light rain and snow this morning. I'm not really even going to spend much time on that because it was very insignificant. Then we have nothing throughout the day Wednesday, and then as we get into Thursday evening, that's when this new system shows up. You see it shows up as some heavy rain along the coast. And then once it builds in, that's where you get heavy rain into the Bay Area and even into the South Bay and Central Coast, and then snow up into the Sierras. We get some heavy snow as we work into the day Friday, so if you're a skier or snowboarder, this weekend could have some nice fresh snow there waiting for you from what fell on Friday. And then, if you stick around throughout the weekend, there's another system coming through. That's going to first come in Saturday morning. The exact timing of this is a little shaky because this is a ways off in the forecast, but it looks like that's going to drop some widespread rain through all the way from the California-Oregon border, possibly all the way down into even Southern California. And it looks like we get some widespread snow with that one as well. And then if we want to take a more local look, because this is sometimes the easiest way, there's and clicked out of there. So let's go to where that system first comes in. Looks like we're in the clear until Thursday afternoon. At 4 p.m. Thursday, that's where that heavy rain starts to fill in along the coast. And then that turns into Sierra snow as we get into 10 p.m. on Thursday, heavy rain building into the Bay Area. And then that heavy snowfall continues throughout Thursday night into Friday morning. Clears up, that was its own little system there. And then the next one shows up 4 a.m. on Saturday into Northern California and then just spreads out throughout the entire state, dropping decent rain, maybe 0.1 to 0.2 inches in some places, and then some decent snowfall as well. It doesn't look anywhere near those extreme snowfall rates we had with that last major storm, but it's certainly good to see. So it is winter. It is good to have some nice storms coming in, bringing us some rain and snow. Great for the water supply, great for the drought. So lots of good news when it comes to the California storms over the next week. It looks like we've got 3 on the way. If we want to see just how much precipitation we're going to be picking up with those few systems, let's just click all the way through. Looks like in the north coast, we could be getting 2 inches of rain around the Bay Area, and this is by next week. So this is what we're expected to pick up. Ignore the Sierras here. I'll show you the snow in a second. Around the Bay Area, over 1 inch of rain over the next week. So it's going to be in little spurts. We have 3 different systems coming in. So it doesn't seem like there's one massive storm that'll be sticking around for 5 days like that last one did. If we want to take a look at the accumulated snowfall, let's just go through to this time next week. Looks like Sierras getting at least a foot of snow. Some places could be getting 1.5 feet to possibly even 2 feet of snow within the next week. So like I said, if you're a skier or snowboarder, could be a good time to go up to Tahoe. Now, it's not just falling in California. There's actually some heavy snow falling in Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and Montana as well. And it's all part of the same kinds of systems, but it seems like it's falling over a longer period of time in the upper northwest. It seems like it's just sticking out over the region throughout the entire next week. It's not as much different systems moving through. Seems like it's just constantly getting light snowfall. And then where you start to get some heavier snowfall is as we work into this weekend. That's where the Cascades will really start to pile up the snowfall accumulations. And then, like I said, not going to spend too much time here because this is a ways off in the weather forecast, but we might have a major storm coming in towards the start of next week. So we're going to have to keep our eye on that, although I won't spend too much time on that one yet. So let's just see how much snow we're going to be getting over the next week in the upper northwest. Like I said, it's actually reduced from what the models were showing yesterday, but as you can see, it's still significant. Cascades picking up over 1 foot of snow, parts of Idaho 6 to 8 inches. Montana, that's where it's really reduced in its snowfall totals. Looks like you're just getting 1 to 4 inches now instead of the 6 to 8 you were previously supposed to get. And then just for fun, let's just see what they're expecting with that next storm to come through, getting up to maybe 3 feet of snow in the Cascades and 2 feet of snow in Idaho. So we'll have to keep our eye on that one. But the other big story going on along the northwest, especially into Montana, and as you can see, all the way down into Texas and the Midwest, is that blast of cold Arctic air. So we're getting large amounts of snowfall, but it's going to be accompanied and promoted by this freezing cold Arctic air. We're just looking at Montana there. You can see it's 30 to 50 degrees below average. As we work into Nebraska and the Midwest, you can see that is 30 to 40 degrees below average as well. So the Arctic blast of cold air is a major part of this story as well, where, like I said, it looks, we're already in it right now. So you're already probably feeling the cold. And then as we get into Wednesday and Thursday, especially in the Midwest here and the plains, you might start to feel like it's easing up a bit. Maybe the cold blast is over. And I mean, it's still 20 to 25 degrees below average, but at least it's not 50 anymore. So you might be thinking it's easing up for a second, but then a second blast starts to come in on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And this one actually looks like it's going to be even more significant and even more widespread. Clicking back here, you can see there are locations in the Midwest all the way down into Texas that are 40 degrees below average, and then that sticks around throughout this entire weekend, spreads out throughout Michigan, Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, and then continues to sit over the eastern half of the country all the way into this time next week. So it's going to be cold for the eastern half of the country, basically for the entire next week, and especially over this next weekend. So again, if you're making any Valentine's Day plans, I would probably make your plans for inside because it is going to be extremely cold. Now, the system that's driving all that is, this graphic just perfectly shows what's going on. We have this low pressure system up here, and this is the middle of the atmosphere. Don't look at these colors for temperature. This is what's really driving the dominant winds that are bringing this cold air in the first place. We've got this low pressure system up in Canada that has counterclockwise flow, which means on the bottom side, it's pulling these winds from west to east. Now down here, we have a high pressure system, which has clockwise rotation. That means above this high pressure system, it's also pulling winds west to east. So it's these two systems combining, really just pulling the wind and the cold air in the exact same direction, working together to just funnel this cold air right over Montana and into the Midwest. And you can see Montana is where you see these isobars extremely close together. So that signifies where the winds are even stronger and where you're going to be pulling in even more cold air. As you can see, it's minus 17 in Great Falls right now, which is actually probably one of the warmer days they're going to have over the next week, as we're going to be getting down into the negative 20s and even negative 30s in some times. So that's the system that's driving this. It's that low and that high working together to funnel that cold air in. And then if we want to go down to the surface now, we can actually look at what these temperatures are doing. Like I said, the blue color here is where you're just below freezing. That's where you're below 32 degrees. Where you have the purple color, that's where you're below zero. So you can see we're already feeling it right now. That cold Arctic air has worked its way into Montana, North Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Iowa, below 0 degrees throughout majority of those states. That's why we have that wind chill warning in effect. So that's also a big thing I should mention. It's not just the cold air that we're dealing with here. We have negative 20 in Great Falls, negative 11 in St. Paul, but we also have some winds. So we get the wind chill factor, so that negative 20 might actually feel like a negative 40. And then as we click through, let's check out this weekend, because that's when that second blast comes in. So you can see on Thursday, throughout the Midwest and the plains, you might feel like it's easing up a little bit. You get back to maybe 10 degrees, 15 degrees, still very cold. I'm over here in San Francisco and San Jose around 52 degrees, but you might be thinking it's easing up for a second because you get just below freezing, not below zero. And then as we work into Friday, you start to see that purple color creep back in. That purple color where it's below zero. And that's that second part of the system that's going to move in Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And you can see how significant this one's going to be, as that purple air has spread out all the way from Montana down all the way through Iowa and even into Illinois, where we're below zero. We're at negative 20, even negative 30 in some places. And then again, with the wind chill, might actually feel like negative 40 and negative 50. And that is going to be sticking around. And then finally, it looks like it's easing up, or at least moving into the northeast towards the start of next week, or around this time next week. It's where it finally mellows out a little bit, and we might get a break from that cold blast of Arctic air. We're going to have to keep our eye on that, though, because that is definitely a significant part of the story. This is a graphic that basically just sums up everything I just said. It shows the overall average for temperature anomaly. You can see plains into the Midwest and some of the northern states. That's where your 30 to 40 degree below average temperatures over the next 2 weeks. This is just an average of the next 2 weeks. But you can see the entire rest of the country is also being affected by this cold air. Just maybe not as much as this central bullseye where that cold Arctic air seems to be sticking around the longest. Now, Montana, I would say, is the coldest place, but it's with this cold Arctic air, but that's also one of the coldest places already. So that's perhaps why that bullseye anomaly isn't right over Montana. So, like I said, with all that cold air, with that wind chill, we do have the wind chill advisories stretching throughout. I think I read earlier that it was 12 different states have this wind chill advisory. You can see Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, working all the way into Illinois has that wind chill warning. So that's certainly something to think about because those are some extremely cold temperatures. Now, the other thing you might notice on this map is this winter storm warning that we have down from Texas, working its way through Arkansas, and then right into the Ohio Valley. That's just a winter storm watch. That's where it's this storm that we're going to be looking at is a ways off in the forecast. So that's where we're just watching the storm right now. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to watch this storm as it develops. Like I said, there was a little snowstorm that moved through the northeast this morning. Not going to spend too much time on that because it's basically already gone. What we want to see is what's happening right here early Wednesday morning. That's when we get the first little traces of this storm. You can see, doesn't look like much is happening. We just have these two little flecks of snow and rain. And then right as we get into Wednesday morning, that's where some of this cold air is being pulled down. Some of that moisture is being pulled in from the Gulf of Mexico. I'll show a great graphic that shows how that works in a second. But then it just continues to strengthen. And one of the key things you're going to want to keep your eye on throughout the storm story we're about to dive into is where we have this red color. That's where you have the freezing rain and ice, which may in fact be the biggest part of this storm because there are locations that could be picking up a 1/4 inch of ice over the lifetime of the storm. The other big part is what happens as it continues to strengthen and then drops large amounts of snow into West Virginia and Virginia, and then large amounts of rain stretching from Texas all the way up into Tennessee. But again, you see right between that boundary of snow and rain, that's where you have the freezing rain and ice, and that's where you have to watch out because that's where driving conditions can really get treacherous. So then it's going to continue to strengthen. That's where Virginia gets some great snowfall with this one. Over a foot is expected in that area, and then it moves off the coast. So let's just click through again because that's a pretty cool graphic to see right there. Shows up early Wednesday morning, starts pulling that cold air down, pulling that moisture in, strengthens. Right on that dividing line of snow and rain is where you get the ice, and then it continues to strengthen, continues to pull in moisture and cold air, and then moves through and off into the Atlantic. So let's just look at the pattern that's driving this because that's sometimes an easier way to see the storm. It was kind of hard to see it right there. Believe it or not, it's actually this little trough off of California right here, and that's going to be working its way early Wednesday morning. That's where you start to see these isobars turn more vertical as we get over Oklahoma and Texas. And then as we move in throughout the day, Thursday, that's where it continues to funnel in that moisture and pull down that cold air and move up through the Ohio Valley, dropping large amounts of snow into West Virginia and Virginia. Now, if that wasn't a very good graphic, I kind of like that one because it perfectly shows that cold blob of Arctic air that's kind of driving the system up here. But an even better way to look at it is checking out this map here. It's this low right here that we're going to see as we click into Wednesday. It doesn't look all that significant, but the effects of it are going to be significant. So you see right there, that's that little trough right there. You see the little dip in these isobars, or lines of constant pressure. And watch what's happening right here. You see that blue color right there. That's the cold air being pulled down into this low. Hopefully the graphics are high definition enough for you to see it, but you can actually see these wind streams pulling that cold air down into this low pressure. You can see exactly how that's working as it continues to creep farther and farther as that wind is just pushing that cold Arctic air down. So that is where you're getting your snowfall and where some of the rain that has previously fallen can freeze. Now, the other aspect of this storm is what's going on down here. Down here, you see there's also winds being pulled into this low, but they're pulling in the moisture from the Gulf of Mexico. So where we have the largest amount of precipitation is right in the boundary of these two, and the largest amounts of ice. You get rain where you're in this green and yellow, that's where you're above freezing. Where you're blue, that's where you're below freezing, that's where you're going to get snow. And then right on the border, that's where we're going to constantly be looking at throughout this storm story, because that's where you're going to get the freezing rain and ice, right on that boundary between the blue and green there. But I might be spending too much time on this graphic, but it's just because it perfectly shows what's going on. We have the winds pulling that cold air down on the northern end of this, and then we have the winds pushing in the moisture from the Gulf of Mexico, allowing precipitation to form, and then where it's cold enough, that's where it falls as snow. Where you're on the boundary, that's where it falls as ice. Where you're above freezing, that's where it falls as rain. So I'm going to close that tab because I think it's using up a bit too much energy, and I have about 60 tabs open. Let's just go back, wide view, and let's actually start diving into this storm as it moves across the country. You can see it starts out right there on Wednesday. Looks like it starts out above Texas and Oklahoma. So let's zoom in there to see if we can see when this first pops up. It looks like all of Oklahoma covered in, or not all, but most of Oklahoma covered in that ice early Wednesday morning. So you might want to watch out for your commute on Wednesday. Just light rain for Texas. This is when the storm is still organizing itself. It hasn't been able to pull in too much of that moisture yet, so it's just the very first traces as this storm starts to move in and then starts to accumulate some of that moisture. As it continues, that's when this storm has enough moisture to actually, and energy and cold air to actually have some widespread effects. That's where we get some extreme ice building into Oklahoma, Arkansas, all the way up into Tennessee. We'll look at that region in a second. I'm getting ahead of myself. But then you can also see heavy rain, 0.2 to 0.5 inches per hour, going all the way through Texas, Louisiana, and through Mississippi and Alabama as well. So this is when the storm has officially strengthened, and that looks to be early Thursday morning. So that's when we're really going to have to watch out, because that's where you could be picking up 1/4 of an inch of ice throughout Oklahoma and Arkansas. So as we move through there, it looks like you're in the clear not until really Friday. Yeah, about Friday. It looks like you're mostly in the clear. Still some rain working into Louisiana and Mississippi. So the big thing to look out on that map there is where that boundary is, where you get the heavy rain down here, and then right where you're almost getting into the freezing temperatures is where you get that freezing rain and ice, which is where you've got to watch out and should pay special attention if you live in those areas. So let's look at the heavy rain first. How much rain are we going to be getting throughout Texas and Louisiana and Mississippi? Looks like in total with the storm, throughout most of Texas, we're getting 1 inch to 2 inches. Some locations working all the way up to 3 inches of rain. Louisiana and Mississippi, especially the southern portions of Mississippi and central Louisiana, that's where we're getting 2 to 3 inches of rain with this system overall. So certainly have to watch out there, because I'm going to have to check the warnings to see if we get any flood watches, because that is a lot of rain to be picking up within the next few days. Now, above that precipitation line is where we get the ice. So let's look at a more local view of Oklahoma, because that's where it looks like we had the most significant ice buildup. Looks like it starts 6 a.m. Wednesday. So like I said, that's where this system is just starting to organize itself over the region. And then it seems like it eases up, but then it actually strengthens again as we work into 6 a.m. Thursday. This is when it started to pull in more moisture from the Gulf of Mexico. That's where you're maybe getting 1/4 of an inch of ice throughout Oklahoma, and then it finally moves off. Looks like you're mostly in the clear by 12 p.m. Thursday. So looks like the times to look out for are 6 a.m. Wednesday morning and 6 a.m. Thursday morning. That looks like when you'll be getting the most ice throughout Oklahoma. So let's just back up again, take the wide view as this storm moves across, pulls in the moisture, pulls down the cold air, and then you can see it's going to be affecting Tennessee, Kentucky, even Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, the Ohio Valley region. And again, keep your eye out for that strip of red right there. That's where you have the freezing rain and ice. So that's what we want to dive into next. That's the little system this morning. Probably woke up to some light snow, but that's gone, so that's not really a part of the forecast. Then it looks like you're mostly in the clear until early tomorrow morning. That's, like I said, 6 a.m. on Wednesday. That's when that first bit of ice started building into Oklahoma. Well, it looks like throughout Tennessee, that's where we get the first little bit of rain. So as we continue to move through Wednesday, we're now getting into Wednesday afternoon. That's where this storm is really starting to organize itself. You can see pull down some cold air. That's what's allowing the snowfall and pulling up that moisture, which is going to allow some of this heavy rain to start to build in. And then you can see as we get into Wednesday night into early Thursday morning, that's where there's almost a collision of that cold air and the moisture. That's where we get some heavier precipitation and some pretty significant ice buildup right there all the way across Kentucky, working into Tennessee as well. And you can see it's actually going to strengthen early Thursday morning. That's where the collision has completely solidified right there. That's where you have a lot of freezing rain and heavy rain throughout the more northern parts of the southeast right there. And then working into the Ohio Valley, that's heavy rain, ice, snow continues. So the big thing to think about here as I click through this is, where are you in relation to this border right here? We have the border of where it's below average temperatures or below freezing temperatures, and then right on the border, and then above freezing temperatures. I don't know why I can't say that right now. Above freezing temperatures, that's where you're getting rain. So that's where you want to look out. And I think the best way to see it, let's just check out the timing that we want to keep our eye on here. Looks like it's early Thursday morning into Thursday afternoon. That looks to be the most significant time we want to look at for where we have that large strip of ice building through, especially Kentucky. So let's go early Thursday morning on this map. Let's bring this over here. That is basically exactly what I was just saying. Where you have the green color, that's where you're above freezing. You can see 35 degrees, 34 degrees. Freezing temperature is 32. So right along that line is where you're at 32. And then above that, you see 23 degrees, 25 degrees, 25 in Louisville. And again, this is early Thursday morning when we're getting all that freezing rain and ice building in. So that is what you want to look out for, especially if you're living in this area, because that's where rain can fall, and then it falls and then it freezes right along that borderline right there. And that's where you get ice, and what I think is the biggest part of the story, especially for this region. As we work through, you can see that freezing line start to creep up a little bit, but then really just hangs out over Kentucky and splits through Tennessee. It was that corner of Tennessee you saw some major ice buildup, and this pretty much explains why. But again, you got that moisture pulling in, cold air pulling down. Right along that border between those two is where we're getting our heavy precipitation, freezing rain, and even some snow. So where we have the snow is where we're enough below freezing that it's not just going to turn into ice. So let's check out how much snow we're going to be getting. That was what fell this morning, 2 to 4 inches. What we want to see is what's falling next. You can see not that much of a Midwest snowstorm. We might be getting 2 inches throughout Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, but as you can see, the bullseye is over here working into West Virginia and Virginia, which we'll take a look at in a second. There is a strip in Kentucky, though, that could be getting 6 to 8 inches with this system, right along that borderline of where we're below freezing and above freezing. So just a more local look at that. Let's check it out right there. That almost perfectly matches that snowfall map right there. So right in northern parts of Kentucky, that's where you're getting snow. 6 p.m. Wednesday. Is that the first traces? First traces is maybe 12 p.m. Wednesday. And then it starts to really build in 6 p.m. Wednesday. basically all of Kentucky is freezing at this point, and that tip of Tennessee that I pointed out as well. And then as we work into 6 a.m. Thursday, that's where this ice buildup starts to get significant. There again on the tip of Tennessee right there, and then throughout majority of Kentucky right here. That's where you're maybe getting a quarter of an inch of ice at a time right here. And you can see it's the northern portions of the state where you're enough below freezing that you're getting snow instead of that ice. So that looks to be gone 6 a.m. Friday. Let's see where it looks the most intense. I would say it looks the most intense in western Kentucky, 6 p.m. Wednesday through 6 p.m. Thursday. That looks like it's the bulk of this storm throughout this region. So, like I said, we've got that snow building into northern parts of Kentucky, but the bullseye was in West Virginia and Virginia. So I think that is the place we want to look to next. As you're getting a sneak peek of what's to come, some areas could be picking up over a foot of snow. So let's take the wide view again. Let's just start back over, because this, along with the ice, which is certainly a major part of the storm, the snowfall totals that we're about to look at are the other major part of this storm. So let's just back up again, go back to the start of the storm where it starts off at Texas here, starts to pull in that moisture from the Gulf of Mexico, pull down that cold air. It drops ice all the way from Oklahoma through Tennessee, Kentucky, large amounts of ice in Arkansas as well. And then here's where it starts to build in to West Virginia and Virginia. You can see they're going to be getting some of that ice as well. But unlike the Midwest, that's where some heavy snowfall looks like it's going to be falling in addition to that ice factor. And then even some extreme rain right there as well. That's quite a graphic to look at. I wonder if I have, we have the closer in view right here. That was that system this morning. This new one might start to feel first effects, some light snowfall as we get into Wednesday afternoon, Wednesday morning. And then that's going to continue to build in. Starts off, it just seems like a light little winter storm, but that's because it's still gathering that moisture from the Gulf of Mexico, pulling down that cold air. I'll show a graphic in a second that perfectly shows that for this region as well. So at this point, this is Wednesday night into early Thursday morning. This is when we're picking up some heavier snowfall throughout West Virginia and Kentucky. And then it seems like it eases up for a second here. It looks like it's light snow. And then it's actually going to intensify again. You see it intensifies right there. That's that wide view we were looking at, where it's a perfect vision of that extreme snowfall. Or not, it's not extreme, but it's 0.1 to 0.2 inches per hour. So that's some pretty good snowfall. The wide area of where we're getting that ice, where you're picking up maybe 0.1 to point or a quarter inch of ice throughout this region, that's the area to watch out for. And then heavy rain where you're above the freezing temperature. And then that's going to move off by Saturday, it looks like. So to go along with that graphic right there, that looks like it might be the key time to watch out for. That's where you're getting a lot of ice and freezing rain building in. But that's basically the summary of this video. You got snow where you're below freezing, ice where you're on the border, and then rain where you're above freezing. So you can see that basically perfectly matches this map as well. As we get into Wednesday and Thursday, you're going to see where that boundary is between that cold air and that warm air. So where it's warmer, where you're above freezing, 35, it's not that warm, but certainly above 32 degrees, that's where you're getting the heavy rain. Right along that border between where you see the blue and the green right there, that's where you're getting the ice. And then where you're getting the below freezing temperatures in West Virginia and Virginia, that's where you're picking up the heavy snow. So let's take a more local look at that precipitation as it falls in. First little traces, 1 p.m. Wednesday, get our first light snow. Then it starts to fill in, start to get some of that freezing rain. And then it starts to pick up 1 a.m. on Thursday. And then you can see it almost looks like it's easing up there for a second, 7 a.m. on Thursday. And then it comes back just full force. This is when it's strengthened again. And I didn't really explain that too well right here. With this storm, the big thing that's going on is you got your low and you can see this cold air being pulled down. and that moisture being pulled in from the Gulf of Mexico. That's what's allowing this strip of precipitation to fall right along that border right there. So that's also what's going on here. Looks like the time to watch out for is 7 p.m. on Thursday. That's where we have some extreme ice buildup, maybe a quarter of an inch per hour. So that's going to make the driving conditions throughout Virginia, West Virginia, pretty treacherous right there. And then where it's warmer, that's where you have the extreme rain. That's going to continue into 1 a.m. on Friday. Luckily at 1 a.m., hopefully not too many people are on the roads. But it looks like we're getting some extreme snow at this point as well throughout your night Friday. And then by the time you wake up Friday morning, hopefully the ice will have melted and you'll just be waking up to some nice fresh snowfall. How much snowfall? Let's take a look. It's going to be pretty significant. Looks like this storm could drop over a foot of snowfall in Harrisonburg and Charlottesville. And then working down into Richmond, you're getting 8 inches. Roanoke, 3 to 4 inches. And you can see right along that dividing line, that's where this heavy snowfall falls. Overall, this is a pretty large winter storm for West Virginia and Virginia. So just the wide view of this storm, just to summarize where that snow is going to fall overall, you can see it did go through Kentucky, getting 6 to 8 inches there. For the most part, misses out in Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio. Some locations maybe getting a couple inches. That's on top of what you already got this morning. So missing out in the Midwest, where there's the bullseye, is West Virginia, and then working into the East Coast as well, where you see over a foot throughout those locations there. Now, like I said, there's some things to worry about with this storm. We've got that ice to worry about, which is why we have moderate impacts expected right here. And while it says moderate impacts, you're certainly going to have to watch out because it's a major driving concern right there. What I'm going to keep my eye out for in the weeks ahead, or the days ahead, is what's going to be happening to this map for West Virginia and Virginia, because this only covers the next 3 days. By the time the storm hits this area full force, that's a ways off in the forecast, more than 3 days. So I'm going to be keeping my eye out to see if this turns into major impacts over West Virginia and Virginia. I have a feeling that it's going to, because over a foot of snow is a significant major winter storm right there. But you can see the strip where we're getting those ice impacts throughout the next few days, and that may actually turn into major impacts as well as the storm continues to strengthen. So overall, just looking at the warnings that we have, you can see it's going from Texas all the way up into the Ohio Valley. But right there, that basically, if I didn't just explain what I was trying to say, well, that explains it for me. It's a winter storm watch right now. We're just watching it. It's a ways off in the forecast, but we're keeping our eye out on it. So it's not considered major yet, but it certainly looks like it has the potential to become major. And then the other part of the story, we have that wind chill. It's not even a watch anymore. It's already happening. We've got that wind chill warning throughout 12 different states, I believe I read, was Montana, North Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, all in this wind chill warning, where we have temperatures that are 30 to 50 degrees below average. And just looking at this map again, looks like it eases up throughout Wednesday and Thursday, and then there's a second blast of that cold air that's going to be coming in this weekend. Saturday, Sunday, into Monday. That's where all the way through Montana, down into Texas, and throughout the majority of the Midwest, that's where we're 30 to 50 degrees below average temperatures there. And then mixing it with the wind chill, which shows up on the warning map, that's where you're actually feeling like you're 50 below zero in select locations. But throughout much of this region, you're going to be 10 to 20 below zero, which with the wind chill will make it probably feel like 30 or 40. Then when is that Arctic blast finally gone? We've been talking about a week. Looks like it finally eases up around this time next week. So you've got a week to deal with that extreme cold. You might get a little break Wednesday, Thursday, but then it's going to come back full force and with a vengeance. Looks like it might even be even colder and more widespread as we get into this weekend. So keep that in mind for your Valentine's Day plans. The other thing to keep in mind is that major storm that we were just talking about developing over Texas and Oklahoma on Wednesday, spreading into the Ohio Valley. Large strips of where that ice is going to be. Large amounts of rain, maybe 2 to 3 inches throughout Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, and then building in some decent snowfall. We're going to have to see if that does in fact end up turning into a major snowstorm on Friday for West Virginia and Virginia, that's more Thursday, where over a foot of snow is expected for those locations. We're also going to be keeping our eye on the west to see what happens with those multiple systems that are coming in, building in over a foot to 2 feet of snow over the next week. Lots to keep our eye on when it comes to the weather forecast. So if you want to stay tuned, I do these weather forecasts live every single morning, and hopefully you learned something and this video was helpful. Thanks for watching.